So, good afternoon. I will talk today about Michelangelo, the human brain, the human spirit, soul, and mind. And as mentioned, here are some of my credentials. The Sistine Chapel frescoes are among the world's most magnificent works of art. They were painted in Rome by Michelangelo 500 years ago. They seem to contain hidden neuroanatomic messages encoded in beautiful visual language that we call the Michelangelo Code. I am the senior member of a multidisciplinary team of 5 authors. Please see the names in the slide. We think we deciphered the code by studying high-definition photographs and by performing human brain dissections using approaches already available in the context of Renaissance, neuroanatomy, and secular philosophy. Universal truth is found there through the divine and the human. We concluded in an article we published in the Neuroscientist in July 2022 that beyond speculation, there seems to be compelling evidence of anatomic symbolism in the frescoes. Michelangelo strategically wove double images into them as part of a code. The frescoes are replete with anatomic structures with subtle semiotic significance. I gave a summary of this presentation at the formal opening of the Mayo Clinic's Surgical Anatomy Laboratory in Rochester, Minnesota in September 2022, and a more extensive report at Mayo's Department of Neurosurgery's Grand Rounds in October 2023. Both presentations can be found in YouTube. Michelangelo was known by his contemporaries as Il Divino. He was an angry and creative genius, a polymath, painter, poet, architect, urbanist, an intellectual, a scientist, an anatomist. His full name was Michelangelo di Lodovico di Leonardo Buonarroti Simoni, simply known by the world as Michelangelo. He was born in 1475 in Capra, Tuscany, a village near Arezzo between Florence and Ferrara, and died in Rome in 1564 at the age of 89. His final resting place is in Florence at the Basilica of Santa Croce. Michelangelo's work inspires great admiration. Goethe once said, I quote, "Without having seen the Sistine Chapel, one can form no appreciable idea of what one man alone is capable of achieving." The Sistine Chapel was built in the 15th century CE under Pope Sixtus IV, hence its name Sistine, with the dimensions of the central building of King Solomon's first Jewish temple in Jerusalem, the quote Beth Amidrash, as in the Old Testament, 132 feet long, 44 feet wide, and 70 feet high. King Solomon's first Jewish temple, by the way, was completed around 3,000 years ago. It was destroyed by the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II about 2,500 years ago. It was rebuilt shortly thereafter as the second Jewish temple, destroyed by the Romans under Titus in the year 70 of the Common Era. Julius II, known as the Warrior Pope, was the first pope to hire him, initially to decorate the ceiling of the chapel. Later, Popes Clement VII and Paul III rehired Michelangelo to decorate the altar wall where he painted the fresco mural, The Final Judgment. The chapel ceiling has spandrels, lunettes, pendentives, and arched windows all around an arched barrel vault. There are 9 Genesis-inspired frescoes in the vault, surrounded by 8 Jesus ancestors, 7 biblical prophets, 5 symbols, and 4 biblical stories. And an exhibition tour in the US shows the frescoes in high-definition photographs. We studied in depth 3 scenes on the vault of the ceiling created by Michelangelo last as a single project. They are from the altar wall to the middle of the room, separation of light and darkness, creation of the sun, moon, and earth, and skipping fresco number 3, we proceeded to fresco number 4, creation of Adam, all part of the 9 Genesis scenes. We then focused our attention to the huge final judgment fresco painted on the altar wall. This is the half of the ceiling vault with the 3 frescoes we studied from right to left. Please notice the blue stars that are attached to each of the 3 frescoes. I want to say that there are at least 50 books, just in English, published since the year 2000 on Michelangelo and his work. In 1980, the Catholic Church embarked on an ambitious project to restore the Sistine Chapel and bring the magnificent frescoes back to their original beauty. For the first time in centuries, it was suddenly possible to see detail and colors that were hidden for a long time. Our team supports the proposition that Michelangelo likely concealed advanced modern philosophical, theological, neuroanatomical, and neurophysiological information in the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican at the center of Catholicism. We propose Michelangelo foresaw some of our present scientific understanding of neuroscience and embedded it in the frescoes. He did most of the work by himself, with just a few assistants. The illustration on the right shows incorrectly how it was thought he did most of the work lying on his back, but he painted most of the frescoes standing up. As per his own sketch on the left side, and as I want to mention, biographies of Michelangelo were written already during his lifetime, one by Giorgio Vasari on the center, and the other one by Ascanio Condivi in the right. Here are our names and primary affiliations in this slide. We are neurosurgeons, neuroscientists, and artists and academicians. The first author, Dr. Savastano, one of my disciples, is now at UCSF, University of California, San Francisco. Some of Michelangelo's frescoes are about the human brain. There is a purposefully link between the anatomy and function of the visualized cerebral structure, as it was understood at the time, and the theme of the painting. Hippocrates, who lived between 450 to 370 before Common Era, thought that the brain housed faculties of sensation and intelligence, while the younger Aristotle, who lived from 384 to 322 BCE, disagreed and situated intelligence in the heart. The brain, he argued, just cooled the blood. Galen, a few centuries later, from 129 to 216 CE, situated man's thoughts and intelligence in the cerebral ventricles, then known as cells. It was thought that they contained the so-called spiritus animalis, or psychic pneuma. In 1990, Dr. Frank Lynn Meshberger from Anderson, Indiana, in the US, reported in JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, that in the creation of Adam, the ceiling central fresco, there seems to be a pink human brain hidden behind God's figure. Please see the upper picture. Dr. Meshberger died in the year 2020. Michelangelo had a lifelong interest in anatomy, beginning public dissections in his early teens in Florence at the court of Lorenzo de' Medici Il Magnifico, where he was exposed to many intellectuals. During his lifetime, Florence became known as the Athens on the Arno, an intellectual and artistic powerhouse. Michelangelo was influenced by the great Leonardo, and Michelangelo in turn had an influence on Andreas Vesalius. And Vesalius founded modern human anatomy. In neuroanatomy, we talk of three planes: coronal, sagittal, and horizontal or axial. Well, Michelangelo painted the frescoes in 3D as a sculptor anatomist, understanding the planes very well. Vesalius published an anatomy book with great illustrations. For example, the ventricular system is displayed in a more realistic way than in previous anatomy books. And a great collection of Vesaliana is found at the Yale University School of Medicine in New Haven, Connecticut, assembled by Dr. Harvey Cushing, the acknowledged father of modern neurosurgery. This is the picture on the left of Dr. Matteo Realdo Colombo, the Cremonensis, who was Michelangelo's good friend, collaborator, and personal physician. Colombo was first a disciple and then a colleague in Padua of the already mentioned great anatomist Vesalius. Dr. Colombo put an emphasis on vivisection, learning about the different functions of the human body. We see in the frescoes of the Sistine Chapel a metamorphosis of biblical imagery into an encoded, exquisite anatomic map, painted and conceived by the great Michelangelo. Here he is at an older age. I will share with you some secrets of the Sistine Chapel. A neuroanatomic code is present in the first Genesis ceiling fresco, in the beginning, or, quote, separation of light from darkness, near the altar wall. A code is also found in the second fresco, creation of the sun, the moon, and the plants of the earth. And in the central fresco, the creation of Adam. And also in the Last Judgment, painted on the altar wall 25 years after the ceiling was painted, with implications regarding the pursuit of the essential truth. So here we go. In the beginning, is up on the ceiling, is the first fresco from the altar wall. So in the beginning, God divided or separated light from darkness. You can see center left slide. Please see the black horizontal double arrow in the upper right within the rectangular frame for light, and a white horizontal arrow on the left for darkness. We think that in this fresco Michelangelo painted the dorsal surface of the human brainstem, which he hid under God's robes, emphasizing that in the beginning it was the creation of the human mind, spirit, and soul, the arousal of consciousness and awareness, the awakening. We became Homo sapiens when we became aware of our awareness. And Michelangelo, in a prescient manner 500 years before the present, placed these functions in the dorsal face of the brainstem. On the right side of the slide, delineated in front of God's chest, are the so-called cerebral colliculi of the tectum. The pineal gland is up in the center or midline in front of God's neck, above or cephala to the ventral brainstem within a goiter, as already noted by Suk and Tamargo from Johns Hopkins already in the year 2010. On the left side of the slide, the divine robe in purple color covers the human brainstem, and on the right of the slide there is a fresh brain specimen with an exposed dorsal brainstem that is one of the 10 human brains that we dissected for this study. Please note within the blue rectangle in front of the neck of God, in the left half of the slide, the enlarged thyroid gland or goiter, the outline of the ventral brainstem that can be identified, as you can see in this slide. So repeating, the four bulges in God's chest under the divine vestment represent the tectum or the quadrigeminal plate, the four cerebral colliculi of the human dorsal brainstem. Here you can see God's figure in the fresco as painted by Michelangelo on the left, and on the right our own artist drawing overlapping the fresco with a sketch of the dorsal brainstem. And here is one of our in situ dissected human brainstems seen on the blue towel on the left, and on the right a charcoal drawing of the dorsal brainstem, the blue arrow showing the tectum. And here we can see the dorsal brainstem and the floor of the fourth ventricle from a straight dissection through the back of the head and neck, splitting the cerebellum and splitting the roof of the fourth ventricle. So in summary, and sorry for so much neuroanatomy, in the first fresco, the dorsal brainstem can be guessed in God's chest, arms, and abdomen as hidden under the garments, while the ventral brainstem is visualized in God's anterior neck, in God's thyroid or goiter. In physiology, it is well known that some of the brainstem functions are vital. In fact, Galen already observed during vivisection that when one presses on the floor of the fourth ventricle of an animal on the dorsal brainstem, a deep stupor follows, and when there is damage, the result is coma or even death. The reason? Respiratory and cardiovascular centers are located there. This is fresco number 2 I'm going to talk about. The creation of the sun, the moon, and the plants corresponds, by the way, to the third day of Genesis, when God creates the sun and the moon on the right half of the Michelangelo fresco, and then on the left side of the painting, God turns around, shows his bum, and goes on to create the plants of the earth. We see in this fresco both the front on the right and the back on the left of the divinity of God. We propose that the sun and moon represent the two human eyes. The sun, the right eye, the moon, the left eye, the arms, the optic nerves, meeting centrally in the optic chiasm. This time it is the ventral surface of the brainstem, or the floor of the brainstem, which is hidden under God's robe. We discern in this fresco part of the optic system and the ventral view of the brainstem, and the drawing is our own artist's interpretation. We see the ventral brainstem and the optic apparatus, like we see it on the blue towel on the right of the slide, as per one of our cerebral dissections made en bloc. And here we can see it in a rubber anatomic model that shows the ventral face of the brainstem and adjacent anatomic structures. And you can see God's bum on the left. And I just want to comment that in pharaonic Egypt, the god Horus was represented by both eyes. The right eye, the sun, the god Ra, the eye of Ra, and the left eye, the moon, the god Thoth, the eye of Horus. The eye of Ra is the eye that sees everything. The sun, the right eye, is painted by Michelangelo in gold in concentric circles. Please see the upper left and center of the slide in an anteroposterior view. The moon on the right upper corner and in the lower half of the slide represents a sagittal section of the anterior part of the left eye with cornea and lens, and is painted in silver. Repeating, as per this slide, that is our own artist's creation. The sun, the right eye, the moon, the left eye, the arms, the optic nerves, and then the optic chiasm, the optic tracts, and the ventral surface of the brainstem, all hidden under God's robes. And here you can see again the fresco as per Michelangelo, and the details of the sun that we think he painted the right eye, and the moon, the left eye, and again God's bum. Skipping fresco number 3, we move to the center of the ceiling, to fresco number 4. Perhaps the most famous painting in the world, La creazione di Adamo, in Italian, the creation of Adam, or Adam's creation. We all can appreciate a human brain shaped as a pink mantle surrounding God and containing other figures, as noted first by Dr. Meshberger. We suggest that Michelangelo depicted the cerebral ventricular system, perhaps to illustrate what was then thought to be the seat of the human mind and soul, as per Galen, like in this slide. Is God the one creating man, or vice versa? Please notice that Adam, the first man, is shown by Michelangelo as a completely nude male adult with an umbilicus from an obvious placental origin. The Last Judgment, or Il Giudizio Universale, is a monumental work of art, the largest single fresco mural of the 16th century. It was painted on the altar wall in 5 years, from 1536 to 1541, past the High Renaissance. Michelangelo started it 25 years after the completion of the ceiling at age 61 and painted more than 300 figures there, mostly male nudes. After his death, a pupil of Michelangelo, Daniele da Volterra, was commissioned by the Vatican to cover the figure's nakedness with loincloths and veils. Da Volterra's intervention earned him the nickname of the maker of breeches, Il Braghettone, in Italian. We propose that the fresco represents a coronal cut of the human brain, Jesus looking muscular, Apollo-like, angry and stern, and Mary, a much smaller figure to our left, his right, and in the midline, in the center, like the pineal gland in the anatomic specimen on the right figure, within the posterior third ventricle, and like the sun in the heliocentric model of the solar system of Copernicus and later of Galileo. The two central figures are surrounded by saints and angels. Some are recognizable. On our left, St. John the Baptist with animal skin and St. Lawrence with a gridiron. Please see the two left blue arrows. St. Peter on the right, please see the white arrow, holds the keys of heaven, and behind him and to the left, his right, is Moses, raising his right hand with flexed fourth and fifth fingers, and what has been identified as Saint Bartholomew, also on the right, with his so-called attributes, the evidence of his martyrdom. Please see orange arrow. But is he really Saint Barth? We think he has been misidentified. We should remember that Saint Bartholomew's religious martyrdom and execution was by skinning or flaying. And we think that Michelangelo painted Dr. Colombo, not Saint Bartholomew. Please see Colombo's portrait in black and white in the left lower corner of the slide. We propose that Dr. Realdo Colombo is the man with the dissecting knife. Please see the red arrow on the left of the slide. Dr. Colombo is holding the knife used to dissect and flay bodies. His black and white portrait is on the right lower corner, and next to it and in color is Michelangelo's self-portrait. The flayed body above seems to have his face in the right upper corner. Please look at the black arrow. So Michelangelo gave a very important role to an anatomist surgeon who is about to start dissecting the left leg of Jesus, the Son of God. And this is the classical dichotomy: flesh and soul, carnal and divine, mortal and immortal, the quest for the universal truth. But we ask, did he really paint brains there? Or even, as has been suggested by others, a kidney, a uterus, placenta, heart, an extra rib, in addition to a thyroid goiter, the optic apparatus, Dupuytren's hand, gematria. And we ask ourselves, is not all painting an illusion? Here we can see a Greek prophetess or an oracle, the Delphic Sibyl, and Joel, the biblical prophet, as painted by Michelangelo. We think that over 500 years ago, this great Renaissance genius unlocked some of the greatest mysteries of neuroscience. And as we attempt today to bring together the different themes of STEAM, acronym for science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, we are just catching up with the infinite universe of this Florentine master, considered already in his lifetime an uomo universale, a universal man. I am very much interested in translational neuroscience in functional neurosurgery that attempts to understand human cognition and the enigmatic entities we know as the human mind, spirit, and soul. The challenge of fully understanding mind and soul, spirit and consciousness is formidable, even today. Galen's old ideas of localization of imagination, reasoning, judgment, and memory in the cerebral ventricles collapsed once it was evident that the functional units, the neurons, lay in the parenchyma of the brain, not in the cavities, the ventricles. And they, by the way, are also on the surface of the cerebral hemispheres, the cerebral cortex. We still strive, though, to understand how do we become aware of our awareness. We are links in a long chain, and these illustrations are from the book The Beautiful Brain by Cajal from the early 20th century. Under the microscope, the human brain is made of at least 100 billion nerve cells or neurons and trillions of synaptic connections. Conscious levels go from deep coma in the left lower corner to consciousness or wakefulness in the right upper corner. So this is Galen and Albertus Magnus. Albertus around 1250 CE and others postulated that the mind is located in the cerebral ventricles. But many other scientists and intellectuals followed, including Baruch Spinoza in the 1600s and René Descartes. We know today that the biology of consciousness is complex. Blumenfeld at Yale proposed a pyramidal model of the mind, and Pandya in India wrote his now classical paper on the brain, mind, soul, and the human brainstem. So where is cognition? In search of it, many levels are studied, as shown in the slide. Here we can see a magnifying glass looking at cortical neurons, and there is a pattern of cortical connectivity underlying cognition. It is what makes us human. And this is a presentation about the human cerebral cortex and the neural circuits for cognition at the Center of Research on the Mind at Yale Neurosurgery by Dr. Nenad Sestan. Leonardo, Vesalius, and Michelangelo were pioneering neuroscientists. They were very interested in the human brain, and specifically the brainstem. The human brainstem is vital and exquisitely delicate. It controls respiration and heartbeat, arousal and sleep, awareness and non-awareness, and if damaged, leads to coma and unconsciousness. In other words, life and or death, light and or darkness. Michelangelo was obsessed with the human brainstem. The anatomical structure hidden deep inside our heads, made of the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla oblongata, that on careful inspection has external rugosities, eminences, bulges, swellings, ridges, depressions, grooves, and folds on both the dorsal and ventral faces, anticipating and predicting what lies inside, the nuclei and the tracts, with vital respiratory centers in green and cardiovascular centers in purple within the pons and the medulla. In neurosurgical operative experience, this area of the brain is known as tiger country because of the high surgical risk, and it has already been said, quote, if we accept the existence of the soul and of its location in the brain, we must focus in the brainstem. This is the human dorsal brainstem in a charcoal drawing, and the ventral brainstem, and back to Michelangelo and to the Sistine frescoes. In the beginning, separation of light from darkness, we see the dorsal and the ventral brainstem. Creation of the sun and the moon, we see the visual system and the ventral brainstem. Adam's creation or the creation of Adam, or the creation of God, we see the brain and the human mind. In the creation of Adam, we see a mid-sagittal section of the brain. Jesus and the Virgin Mary surrounded by saints in the Last Judgment, the structures seem to be a coronal brain section. The central figures seem to represent anatomical structures within the posterior third ventricle, and Dr. Colombo appears to be the anatomist and surgeon. Finally, and interestingly, it has been said that before his death, Michelangelo burned all of his notes, cartoons, and drawings. There were about 1,000 drawings and sketches from the ceiling alone, of which only 70 are thought to have survived. Were the others really destroyed by him, or by the church? Or are they in different locations preserved for future inquiries by curious minds? Just recently, several wall drawings by Michelangelo and or his disciples were found at the San Lorenzo Church in Florence. Drawings in caves and in secret rooms 500 years after they were drawn. My co-authors and I would like to find all of Michelangelo's lost neuroanatomical sketches and drawings as they looked before they were dressed up and or hidden under robes, vestments, and tunics. I thought I could have gotten some help and guidance from the Argentine Pope, but he died before I had the chance to do it. We would like to gain access to the secret Vatican archives. And in conclusion, although Michelangelo's unparalleled frescoes in the Sistine Chapel have been construed to depict traditional Roman Catholic biblical interpretations, we suggest that Michelangelo concealed anatomic information about the human brain in his renderings. We analyzed the imagery in the Sistine frescoes with a particular interest in the relationship between certain purported anatomic depictions and details demonstrable using techniques available during the High Renaissance. A significant number of anatomic references and representations can be imputed to Michelangelo's frescoes. This depth and potentially encoded visual allusions are not obvious. They must be sought out. Our analysis from our perspective as neuroscientists suggests that the iconographical encryption is not incidental, but rather carefully allegorical, since it is recognizable to the trained eye. I hope this anatomic interpretation of Michelangelo's imagery will add a new and accessible scientific dimension to the glory of the Sistine Chapel. The hidden elements might just reflect a flourish of virtuosity and a mastery of anatomy, but they almost certainly no less allude to a chain of significant tropes. Michelangelo's genius, combined to reference of his complex relationship with the Church wounded by the Reformation, could not be easily navigated in his time. While we cannot fully fathom all of his intentions, the application of 21st century imaging techniques to the sublime figures that float across the Sistine's vault and altar wall grants a sharper focus on Michelangelo's masterpiece and his mind. And this is what we call the Michelangelo Code. This was my last talk. I am pleased to have participated in this enrichment program. I want to give special thanks to the stage management, to Bruno, the cruise director, and to Siyat, the assistant cruise director, and to you, our fellow passengers. And this was the end. Thank you very much. And obviously I will enjoy listening to comments and trying to answer questions at any moment in the next couple of days. Thank you.